Alright, so I'm degreasing some parts. I'm going to bring those larger parts over here in just a minute. But I need to deal with the radiator. And so what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to degrease it, clean it up. It doesn't have any holes in it, it doesn't leak. At least it didn't when I took this tractor apart. So I'm going to clean it up, I'm going to paint prep it, and I'm going to paint it black. And I think that's all I'm going to do to it. I have this, and it has 18 bolts that hold the radiator on to the radiator tank, the big cast iron front end of the tractor. And these are pretty rusty, as you can imagine. So all I'm going to do is leave them in a little bucket, and I've been using this Evaporust stuff, works pretty well. I've had this can a while, so we'll see how it works. But you can reuse this. I mean, after you use it, you can pour it back in the container. We'll see how that works. I'm going to leave those in for about 24 hours, and I'll stir them around with a brush every now and then and kind of see how they do. And also I have these straps that go on either side of the radiator, and they're pretty rusty too. So I'll figure out how to de-rust those. I'm just going to do a test on the ends of them and see how good a job this stuff does on it. So I've got this clip. I got another one here I've been soaking in my super clean solution. So I'm just going to brush it all the way around and see if I can get it cleaned up. And I'm just dipping it in a solution of water. And you can see that cleans up pretty well, pretty nicely, and it's got some discoloration and perhaps some rust on it. And I haven't decided if these need to get painted or not, but they're kind of ready for that if we need to paint them. So I'll let them sit out here and dry. I'm going to start with the magneto. And the trick on this, I mean, I want to clean this up as much as I can, but I don't want to get any of my solution inside of it. So I'm going to have to be kind of careful how I do this. So I'm going to use this vat here, and I'm just going to wet my brush and just degrease the silver part of it. And then instead of dipping it in water, I'll spray it. And hopefully won't get any water inside that will hurt any of the electronics. I don't think, pretty sure it's waterproof. I mean, it's on the tractor, so it should be fine. But we'll see here in a few minutes how this cleans up. Alright, so I'm going to just spray it with water so that it doesn't get submerged or anything. Try to keep it straight up and down. See how that works. So this is the side I haven't cleaned yet. And you can see it's got a lot of grease and just gunk. And this is the side I just cleaned. And it looks real nice. So I'm just going to wipe this down, and I'll have to go over the top here and on around the other side. And it looks like I got this a little wet, but I'll be more careful next time. So I think this is going to work great. I'm just going to clean this up and set it aside. Then we'll move on to the alternator or the generator. So I'll keep at this, and I'll show you the magneto when I'm all done. Alright, so I cleaned up the magneto, and this side cleaned up real nice. The other side is a little dingier and has stuff in the crevices. I'm going to stop here because I think it's cleaned up as best I can. A lot of it's just discolored for whatever reason. So I think it looks pretty good. I dusted off the cap and I'll clean the cap up a little bit more, but I think we're ready to move on to the generator, and I'll pull that out next. So here's the generator. Man, is it a mess. And so what I'm going to do is take I think that's the cutout on top. I'm going to take that off, and I'm going to tape up the Delco Remy tag, and then I'm going to clean this thing up and degrease it. You can see it's pretty filthy on the end here where the oiler is, and of course on the other end as well. And then I'm going to paint it black. So I'm going to have to get this thing ready to paint by taping it off and so forth. So I'll start tonight by degreasing it, taking the lid off of it there, and now we'll move on with the generator. All right, well, we're continuing to put the cub back together. It's a 1948 Farmall cub. It's been repainted, so I'm working on reassembling things. So right now we're going to be putting on the exhaust and intake manifolds. And you know, one of the things I really couldn't find is, I mean, I took this thing apart a couple years ago and I couldn't really find any information about, well, you have to put this back together before you put that back together. And so it was a little bit trial and error. So far I haven't had to take anything off to put something else on. So I guess that's good news. That is going to have to go this way. You know, I may have to backtrack on some of these steps just because of that. But so far everything's looking like it's going to go on. Things are going to go back on just fine. So I'm not too worried about that. All right, there's lots of, I guess, controversy about the exhaust and intake manifold setup. Mine is kind of welded. It's welded onto a pipe fitting here, so I'm sure that's not the stock deal. It's even a little bit crooked. So since this whole unit is kind of black and pitted, I decided just to leave it that way. Because some of the examples that I saw show the whole thing black, or the whole thing red, or this part red and this part black. So I decided to go with this part red because the intake portion of this shouldn't get as hot as the rest of it. So maybe the paint will stay on there, we'll see. So anyway, I'm going to go with it this way. I only put a coat or two on here and it's pretty rough looking, but it's up under the hood and you can't see it that well. So I decided to just go with it. So I've retrieved the nuts that go on this, and I'll start with the outside ones because these you can use a socket on. And I didn't paint these nuts. I painted most other bolts and nuts, but I decided not to mess with these because they're kind of tucked up underneath there anyway, so I figured what the heck. These are 9/16, so I'll run them up here with my socket. I painted the generator and the cutout, and it's hanging right over here now. It looks, I didn't spend a lot of time. I mean, I sanded it down and degreased it as best I could, but I left the ends sort of the natural metal color, and the base of the cutout I also left in its natural. In fact, I didn't even sand or degrease that. I just left it to sort of match the other part. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not, but it made sense to me, so that's what I did. And I have the carburetor on a workbench over there, and I've rebuilt that carburetor more recently, and so I'm gonna just go with the carburetor as it is, and if I have issues, I'm gonna work on it, but I think it should be okay. So we'll see how that turns out. These nuts are always interesting, the ones that the inner ones, because you can't get a socket on them, so you have to run them up with a wrench, and there's just even not a whole lot of room for the wrench, so we'll see how that goes. And this one just doesn't even turn all that well, so it's a little harder on your fingers to finger tighten it, so you don't have to use your wrench very often. Working on the fan assembly, I painted the blade red and the center black, and that should be ready to install today too. What I didn't realize is that the fan blade assembly actually has oil in it. So I took it apart without realizing that. I guess I should have known that. And got oil all over the place. I cleaned it up, and I didn't paint the whole thing, just the blade. So I'm going to leave the rest just however it was. And part of it was red and part of it was black. So I didn't bother repainting that whole assembly, because it's got the pulleys, and there isn't that much room to paint anyway, so I figured it's up underneath and behind the radiator, it's tough to see, so I'm not going to bother with it. Figure I can always go back and paint it if it ends up looking silly or if somebody makes fun of me. When you have an old tractor, you just turn wrenches. You don't really care if you nick the paint, because most of the paint's gone anyway. Now that I painted this thing, I guess I have to care whether I ding it up putting it back together, so I'm going to have to be more careful. I kind of liked it the other way. In fact, this was an interesting project, and it still remains to be seen whether this engine is going to run and all of that. And there's a lot of steps you got to go through just lining up all the gears inside the front of the engine. there's an idler gear in there, and there's a cam gear, and there's the crankshaft, and all those things have to be pointed just right. And there's marks on the gears, and you read through the instructions, and they tell how to do it all, and you just double check it and triple check it. So we'll see if all that worked out. I'm hoping it did. Thought I did pretty well with that part of it. But now it's all inside, and there's nothing you can really do without taking it all apart again. So we're gonna find out the truth here before too long, and see if we can't get this thing running. All right, so that's the exhaust and intake manifold. The carburetor's next. Once I get the carburetor, I'll be able to hook up the throttle linkage right over here. So that'll be the next thing. So I'm going to go get the carburetor and the linkage, and I'll be back in just a second. All right, so I'm going to install the carburetor right here. Interesting thing about this carburetor, first of all, it's a lot dirtier than I remember it being. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on the way it is, and I'll take it off later and clean it up. But these two studs have always been pointed in, they're not parallel to each other, they're pointed that way and that way, and it makes it a little challenging to get it on this flange here at the bottom of the intake manifold, only because they don't line up all that great. So it's kind of, you got to sort of jam it up there, and I don't like doing that, but kind of is what it is. So we're going to put the washers on here, the little lock washers. And we're gonna, there's only two nuts that hold this on. And I believe this is a 9/16. I'm sorry, 7/16. Hopefully I have that here. Let's see, 1/2 inch. Yep, I'm gonna have to go find that wrench. I'll be back. All right, well, it looks like this throttle rod actually goes through the middle of the dashboard. See that hole up to the top there, right in the middle, right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and install that, but I gotta put this, I gotta feed the rod through it. So I got to get the bolts into the. I remember this. I remember this dashboard being a real pain because you can't hardly reach these bolts. Let me go down in there. My dashboard was actually broken, cracked down at the bottom, so one of the holes was not functional. So I had a friend weld it for me. Did a nice job. So what the problem I'm having here is that you can't really see where the bolt's going because your hand's in the way. There's just not a bunch of room between the hydraulic block and the dashboard. So it's a hassle, but we will overcome. Having a lot of trouble just getting the bolts started down there. There we go. I'm going to have to get my extension in order to drive those in, so I'll be back. Alright, so the bolts on the dashboard are 9/16. So I got them in, and I painted part of the bolts, and that's probably why they're a little hard to get going. And as I recall, there's a lot of wiring that originates down in the dashboard. So I may have to start over and pull the dashboard out in order to get all the wiring in. The gauge, I think there's it's probably an ammeter, and there's the kill switch, and I think there's something else that goes in there. I'll have to take a look. I just don't remember. I mean, I've owned this tractor forever. You'd think I'd know what's down there. but I don't. All right. Get all these tools out of the way. See if we can't get this thing hooked up the way it's supposed to be. Yep. And there it goes, and I'll get some cotter pins to put through there. And it looks like a pretty small one. And that should do it. So that's the throttle rod that operates the governor. Looks good. All right.